The envelope had already been opened. That was the first thing Zara noticed when she walked into the conference room ahead of everyone else. She was 8 years old, and she had no business being in that building at all, but her mother had nowhere else to take her on a Saturday morning. And her mother worked for the man whose name was on the top floor, so there Zara stood in a navy dress with white buttons, holding a juice box she hadn't finished, staring at an envelope on the long mahogany table that had already been opened and resealed with a piece of clear tape so thin most adults would never have seen it. Zara saw it. She set down her juice box and moved closer. The envelope was ivory, heavy stock, the kind that costs more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. It was addressed to Cornelius Ashby in dark ink, and in the upper left corner someone had written the return address by hand in letters that were too careful, too deliberate, the way handwriting looks when someone is trying to make it look like someone else's handwriting. The tape along the flaps was barely visible, but it was there. Zara did not touch it. She had been told many times in her 8 years not to touch things that did not belong to her. Instead, she stepped back, finished her juice box, and waited for her mother to come find her. Cornelius Ashby had built his firm over 31 years, starting from a 2-room office in Cincinnati, with second-hand furniture, and a fax machine that jammed every third page. By the time he was 62, Ashby and Partners occupied 4 floors of a building in downtown Columbus, employed 214 people, and had settled cases totaling more money than Cornelius sometimes thought was real. He was not flashy about any of it. He drove a 10-year-old Volvo. He brought his lunch 3 days a week. He remembered the names of the custodial staff and asked after their families. He was the kind of man people described as decent, and they meant it as a compliment, and he accepted it as one. The Saturday gathering had been his idea. A working brunch, he had called it, a chance for the senior partners to review the Whitmore Group acquisition before the Monday filing. He had reserved the large conference room, arranged for food to be brought in, and personally confirmed attendance with each of the 6 people he expected. One of them was Suzanne Morrow, who had been with the firm for 19 years and who handled more of the firm's financial operations than her title of senior financial director technically required. Another was Preston Lyle, who had joined 8 years ago and had been angling for a named partnership longer than was comfortable for either of them to acknowledge. The others were good lawyers doing good work. Suzanne was something else. Cornelius did not know that yet when he walked into the conference room at 8:47 that morning and found Zara standing near the window with an empty juice box and very serious eyes. "Well," he said, "you must be Renee's daughter." "Zara," she said. "Zara, I'm Cornelius." "I know," she said. "Your name is on the elevator." He laughed, which surprised him. He hadn't laughed easily in several months. He pulled out the chair at the head of the table and set down his briefcase and noticed the envelope immediately because it was in the center of the table and had not been there when he had left the building the night before at 7:15. He picked it up and turned it over once. That was already opened. Zara said from behind him. He turned. "I'm sorry, the envelope. Someone opened it and put tape on it. The tape is right there." She pointed without moving closer. "I didn't touch it." Cornelius looked at the envelope again. He tilted it slightly toward the light coming through the window, and then he saw it, the hairline seam of tape along the flap. So thin, so careful. He set the envelope back down on the table without opening it. "When did you get here?" he asked. "Before anybody," Zara said. "My mom was setting up the coffee." "Did you see anyone in this room?" She thought about it. "The lady with the red scarf came in and put the envelope on the table, and then I came in." Cornelius was quiet for a moment. "What did she look like?" "Tall brown hair. She had a badge, but she put it in her pocket before she walked out." Cornelius knew exactly who that was. There was only one woman on the senior team with brown hair who wore a red scarf in autumn as reliably as other people wore watches. He had known her for 19 years. She had sat across from him at his father's funeral and brought food to his house when his wife had her surgery 3 years ago and told him twice, in his own office with the door closed, that she thought of the firm as the thing she had helped build, that she would walk through fire for it. He had believed her. He looked at the envelope on the table. "Zara," he said carefully, "I need you to go find your mom and stay with her until I come get you. Can you do that? Is something wrong?" "I'm going to find out," he said. Renee Okafor had worked for Cornelius Ashby's firm for 11 years as an executive coordinator, which meant she organized things that would fall apart without her and received credit that did not always reflect that reality. She was sharp and quiet and fiercely protective of her daughter, and when Cornelius appeared in the doorway of the side kitchen where she was arranging pastries on a tray, she read his face immediately. "What happened?" she said. "Nothing yet. I need Zara to stay with you this morning. I also need you to do something for me, and I need you not to ask me about it until later." Renée looked at her daughter, who had followed her mother's eyes to Cornelius and back again with the calm focus of a child who is very good at reading rooms. All right, Renée said. I need the building access log for this morning, starting at 6 a.m. I can pull that from the front desk system. Can you do it without going through the main office? A pause. Yes, good. Print it and bring it to me. Don't let anyone see you do it. Rennie nodded and handed Zara a croissant. Zara took it without looking at it, still watching Cornelius. You believe me, she said. About the tape. I do, Cornelius said. The lady didn't see me. I was by the window. I know. He looked at her for a moment. You did the right thing telling me. That was brave. Zara considered this. My mom says being brave just means you do the thing anyway, even when you're scared. Your mom's right, Cornelius said. And then he went back to the conference room and closed the door and sat down at the long mahogany table with the envelope in front of him and his hands flat on the surface and thought very carefully about what to do next. The others began arriving at 9. Preston came first, already talking, before he was fully through the door about the Whitmore timeline and what he saw as a structural issue in the third filing. He poured himself coffee and did not notice the envelope, or if he noticed it, he said nothing. The others filtered in over the next 15 minutes. Cornelius greeted each of them and watched their eyes. He had spent 3 decades watching people in rooms, and he was good at it. He noticed who looked at the envelope. He noticed who looked away. Suzanne arrived at 9:18, which was unlike her. She was always early. She came in with her red scarf folded neatly over one arm and her tablet under the other, and she said good morning to the room and she sat down in her usual chair, 3 seats to Cornelius's left, and she looked at the envelope on the table, and then she looked at Cornelius's, and something in her expression adjusted. Not much. Just slightly, the way a person's face adjusts when they expected something to be different and find that it isn't. Cornelius had been watching for exactly that. Before we start, he said, when everyone had settled. Someone left an envelope for me this morning. I'd like to open it with everyone present. Preston said something about getting started on the timeline. Cornelius picked up the envelope and held it for a moment without opening it. Suzanne, he said, do you know what's in here? The room went still in the way rooms do when something shifts underneath them. Why would I know what's in your mail, Cornelius? She said. Her voice was even. Her hands were flat on the table, which was the same thing Cornelius had done 20 minutes ago, and he noticed that. I'm asking because someone came into this room before 9 o'clock this morning and placed this envelope on the table. The building access log will tell me who was here, but I thought I'd ask first. A beat of silence. I came in early, Suzanne said. I do that sometimes. You came in at 6:42, said Renée from the doorway. Everyone turned. Renée was standing just inside the door holding a single printed sheet. She walked to Cornelius and placed it face down on the table in front of him without breaking stride, then stepped back. Cornelius did not look at the sheet. He kept his eyes on Suzanne. The envelope was tampered with, he said, opened and resealed. A child noticed it before any of us walked in, Preston said. What does that mean, tampered with? It means someone wanted to know what was inside before I did, Cornelius said, and then they wanted to make sure I still received it. The room had gone the kind of quiet that feels like held breath. Suzanne's hands were still flat on the table. I think you're making an accusation you don't have the evidence to support, she said. Then let's find the evidence, Cornelius said. I'll call building security and have them pull the camera footage from this floor. If you weren't in this room this morning, that will show it. And if you were, that will show it too. Suzanne said nothing. I don't want to do this, Cornelius said, and he meant it. 31 years had taught him that the moments you dread most are usually the ones that matter most. 19 years, Suzanne. You know what this firm is to me, what it was built on. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a moment something in her face cracked. Not much, just enough. You are going to find out Monday, she said quietly. Find out what? A long pause. The Whitmore Group funds were redirected, she said. Twice. In the last 4 months, the amounts were within the threshold that doesn't trigger automatic review. Her voice was flat now, like she was reading from a document. The envelope contains a copy of the internal transfer records. Someone sent them to you anonymously. I intercepted the original delivery Friday afternoon, and I made a copy of everything in it. I wanted to know what you knew before you knew it. The room was very still. Why? Said Preston. His voice was careful, controlled. He was a good lawyer. Suzanne did not answer him. She answered Cornelius. Because the redirected funds weren't mine, she said. I found them 6 weeks ago during the Q3 review, and I've been trying to trace them back without anyone knowing, because the account they're tied to is registered to someone in this room. Every person at the table absolutely motionless. I was afraid, she said. I knew how it would look if I came to you. I knew the records made it look like the authorization came from my access level. I was trying to protect myself and the firm at the same time, and I handled it wrong. I know that. I know how it looks." Cornelius was quiet for a long time. "Why didn't you come to me?" he said finally. "Because the account," she said slowly, "is tied to a name I didn't want to say out loud until I was certain, and I'm still not certain." She looked around the table. "But you're going to open that envelope, and then we'll both know." The envelope contained 11 pages. Cornelius read them slowly and in silence while the room waited. He read every page twice. When he finished, he set the papers face down on the table and looked at the window for a moment. Then he looked at Preston, was looking at his tablet. His expression was neutral, composed, the expression of a man who is waiting for a meeting to proceed normally. His hands were in his lap. "Preston," Cornelius said. "Yeah." "The account, receiving the redirected transfers. Do you recognize the account number if I read it to you?" "I'm not going to know an account number off the top of my head." "Cornelius." "I know." Cornelius looked at the top slowly, in the way he read things aloud in a courtroom when he wanted the jury to hear each digit, individually. Preston said nothing. "The account is registered to Lyle Holdings, LLC, Cornelius said. "Filed in Delaware 18 months ago. The registered agent is a law firm in Wilmington I've never heard of." He looked up. "Preston, that's not." Preston started. "Don't," Cornelius said. "Just one word, quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from 31 years of knowing when someone is about to lie and not having any patience left for it." Preston closed his mouth. The silence in the room lasted long enough that one of the other partners shifted in her chair. Someone set down a coffee cup. Small sounds. The sounds of a room trying to hold itself together. "I want everyone except Preston and Suzanne to leave," Cornelius said. "Please take your things with you. I'll call each of you this afternoon." They filed out without speaking. Renee, still in the doorway, caught Cornelius's eye. He gave a small nod and she withdrew, pulling the door closed behind her. What came out over the next hour was not a dramatic confession. It was more like the slow draining of something that had been under pressure too long. Preston had not planned it to be large. That was the thing that struck Cornelius as strangest and saddest. It had started with one transfer, a small one, experiment, the kind of thing a person does to see if an alarm goes off. No alarm went off. So there was another, and another. The amounts were calibrated carefully to stay below internal thresholds. Over 8 months, $460,000 had moved from client settlement accounts through a series of internal reroutes into Lyle Holdings. Preston had been planning to leave the firm. He hadn't told anyone that. He had been talking to a group in Atlanta about starting something new, and he had convinced himself, the way people convince themselves of things when they want something badly, that the money was an advance on what he would have made as a named partner, that he was owed it, that the firm had held him back long enough. He did not say any of this defensively. He said it the way someone says a thing when the saying of it is finally a relief. Cornelius listened to all of it without interrupting. When Preston finished, Cornelius said, "I need you to write down every transfer, every account, every date, everything you can remember. And then I'm going to call the authorities, and you're going to cooperate fully. Do you understand?" Preston nodded. "And Preston," Cornelius said. He waited until Preston looked at him. "You were a good lawyer." That part was real. "Whatever made you think this was the answer?" I don't know. I don't know what I missed." He paused. Preston looked at the table. He didn't answer. Cornelius stood, picked up the envelope, and walked to the window. Columbus stretched out below him, gray and wide and early morning still. He had stood at this window many times over the years and thought about many things. He thought now about a child in a navy dress with white buttons standing beside a table with an empty juice box, pointing at something almost invisible and saying, "I didn't touch it." He thought about what it cost to speak up in a room full of people who aren't listening. The formal investigation took 4 months. The findings were thorough, and the cooperation Preston had promised held, partly because Cornelius had made clear through his own counsel that the extent of that cooperation would be reflected in how the firm responded to the authorities, and partly because Preston seemed to have arrived, somewhere in that first quiet hour, at a place where he was done pretending. Suzanne Morrow was cleared completely. The internal review confirmed that her access credentials had been used in the initial transfer authorization, but forensic analysis showed the authentication had been spoofed using a key logger installed on her workstation 8 months earlier, almost certainly during a period when Preston had stayed late in the office alone. Suzanne had found the discrepancy in Q3 and had been pulling records quietly for 6 weeks before the anonymous envelope arrived, and sent her to the conference room before dawn to understand what someone else already knew. She came to Cornelius's office 3 weeks after it was all finished. She sat across from him in the chair she had sat in 100 times. "I should have come to you immediately," she said, "when I found it." "You were afraid," he said. "I was afraid," she agreed, "and I made it worse by trying to handle it alone." Cornelius thought about that. "You also tried to protect the firm even when you thought it might not protect you. That's not nothing." She was quiet for a moment. "The little girl," she said, "Renee's daughter, Zara. I saw her when I came in that morning. She was standing by the window. I thought she was just a kid waiting for her mom. I didn't think she was watching me." "She was watching everything," Cornelius said. Suzanne shook her head slowly. "Children," she said, which was not quite a sentence and didn't need to be. In December, Cornelius called Renee into his office and closed the door. "I want to do something," he said, "for Zara. Something real, not a gift card or a thank you note. Something with weight." Renee was quiet the way she was quiet when she was genuinely considering something. "She'd tell you she didn't do anything special," she said finally. "She'd say she just told you what she saw." "That's exactly what she did," Cornelius said. "That's all it was. She told me what she saw, in a room full of things she didn't understand, because she thought it mattered. That's not common. In children or in adults." Renee looked at the window. "What did you have in mind?" he told her. The Education Trust was established in Zara's name in the second week of December. It was enough to cover 4 years of university fully funded with a secondary provision that would add to it annually until she turned 18. Cornelius signed the paperwork on a Thursday afternoon in his office with his assistant and one of his partners as witnesses, and then he had Renee bring Zara in. Zara was wearing the same navy dress. She had gotten slightly taller. She sat across from him and looked at the documents on his desk the way she had looked at that envelope 4 months ago, not with excitement, but with careful attention. "Do you understand what this is?" Cornelius asked. "Mom explained it," she said. "It's for college. It is, because of what you did in September." Zara thought about this. "I just told you what I saw," she said. "I know," Cornelius said. "That was enough. That was everything, actually." She looked at the documents again. Then she looked at him with the same direct, unhurried gaze she'd had the morning they met. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask me anything. Were you scared when you figured it out?" Cornelius was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "I was." "But you did it anyway." "I did." Zara nodded slowly, as though that settled something she had been thinking about. "My mom says that's what brave is," she said. "Your mom's right," Cornelius said. The same thing he had said 4 months ago in a hallway outside a conference room where everything was just beginning to come apart. And then slowly to come together. He slid the signed documents across the desk toward Renee, and outside the window, the December light was pale and clear over the city, and in the small, quiet office on the 14th floor, the thing that had been broken was not entirely fixed, but something true had been said aloud in a room full of people, and it had mattered, and that was more than most things ever got to be.